Good morning. So, in this first Sunday of Lent, we get the story of Jesus being driven into the wilderness. And this year, we get it from the Gospel of Mark. And everything in the Gospel of Mark happens very quickly with not a whole lot of description. And often the words immediately are used. Not as much in this passage, but in this passage, we definitely see it's a quick description. And the Spirit immediately drove him into the wilderness. Oh, immediately. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. And that's all we get. That is all the description we get. In the wilderness, 40 days, with angels and beasts, and Satan tempted him. We get 5 pieces of information there. But one of the things about the wilderness is that in ancient days, in the culture that Jesus was a part of, people went to the wilderness expecting to find scrubby deserts, goats, bandits, maybe, but they often found God. Because sometimes, and this is true even in modern days, when we are removed from everything that is familiar and comfortable to us, when we have to get out of our comfort zone, and when we don't have any of the usual distractions, what we find is sometimes goats and sometimes bandits, but more often God. Now, Jesus, and this is a bit of a reversal, and it's probably a very intentional reversal. Jesus, who walks with God daily, when he goes out into the wilderness, he finds goats, and maybe he saw bandits. But he wrestles with his demons. He wrestles with Satan himself. And this is the last time, in any of the Gospels where this story shows up, this is the last time that we are given to understand that Jesus had doubts, that he was significantly tempted. Now, you could argue that his time in the garden right before he died, that he had doubts. You could make that argument. I could see that. But you could also argue that you could understand that bit differently, that bit in the garden. And that this here, his temptation in the wilderness, was the last time he was really tempted to not do what he was about to do, which was to have a public ministry, to gain followers and students and teach them, and preach to the masses, and heal random strangers, and exorcise demons where he found them. This, before that moment, before the big moment for him of his public ministry and the beginning of his public ministry, this is when he faced the very last dregs of the fears he might have had about that. And for you and I, the truth about going into the wilderness is that we can find God there. And if we're willing to look inside of our hearts and inside of our souls and inside of our minds, we can also find all of the things that tempt us. They tempt us away from being the children of God that God knows we can be. Loving, compassionate, forgiving, open-hearted, open-minded, peaceful. Because that's who we're really meant to be. And that comes out in great variety. And what that looks like on me might be different than what it looks like on you. But that's who we're meant to be as children of God. Peaceful, loving, joyful, and not as a mask that we put on to impress other people. That's who we're meant to be deep down, instead of anxious and rageful and worrying. And while we can spend all of our lives being distracted from trying to be this way or avoiding being this way, we can take time apart, even in a pandemic, even under quarantine. We can all take time apart, time in the wilderness, to look inside of ourselves and see what is keeping me from being the beautiful child of God I'm meant to be. And so I ask you this Lent, what is keeping you from being the beautiful child of God you're meant to be? Amen.